About the year 1500 AD, the incarnation of God Sri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu began the Hare Krishna movement in Navadvip, a city in the Indian province of Bengal. This movement, based on the philosophy of ancient Sanskrit texts of devotion to Krishna like the Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, spread all over India within a short time. The movement popularized Sankirtan, the congregational chanting of the Maha Mantra Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare. Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, as the most effective means of God realization for the present age of Kali, a time of rampant faithlessness, sin and materialism. After 1750 AD, the influence of the Hare Krishna movement seemed to wane. Many sects of Sahajiyas, cheap pseudo-devotees, sprouted up, each claiming to be the true purveyors of Vaishnava Dharma, the religion of Lord Vishnu or Krishna. Because of their bad character, the Sahajiyas brought disrepute upon the pure movement of love of God begun by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. In the 1800s, an eternally perfect devotee of Krishna descended from the spiritual world to the material world to revive the Hare Krishna movement and to initiate its expansion beyond the borders of India. This was Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakura, who was named Kedarnath Datta by his father, some say by his godfather, was born in opulent circumstances on 2 September 1838. On a Sunday in Biranagara, Ulagrama, in the district of Nadia. He was the seventh son of Raja Krishnananda Datta, a great devotee of Lord Nityananda. He was also known as the great-grandson of Madana Mohana and the third son of his godfather Anandakandra. He would be known as Daitya Kulara Prahlada in the family of demons. This was because Vaishnavism was not very much respected in his family. On his mother's side, there was no respect for Vaishnavism at all. His childhood was spent at the mansion of his maternal grandfather Mustafi Mahasaya, in Biranagara. His environment at this time was very opulent. He got his elementary education at the primary school started by his grandmother. Later he attended an English school in Krishnanagara, started by the king of Nadia. He left that school when his older brother died unexpectedly of cholera. When he was 11 years old, his father passed away. Subsequently, the grant of land that had been conferred upon his grandmother changed owners. At this time the family fell into a condition of poverty. Their great wealth proved to be illusory. Still, the young Kedaranatha Datta passed over these difficulties with great endurance. His mother arranged a marriage for him when he was just 12, 1850 AD, to the then 5-year-old daughter of Madhusudana Mitra Mahasaya, a resident of Ranagata. Around this time Kasiprasada Ghosh Mahasaya Thakur, Kedaranatha Datta's uncle, who had mastered under the British education, came to Ulagrama after the death of his maternal grandfather. He schooled young Kedaranatha Datta at his home in Calcutta. This was at first resisted by Kedaranatha Datta's mother, but by the time he was years of age he was allowed to go. The house was situated in the Heduya district of central Calcutta. Kasiprasada was the central figure of the literary circle of his time, being the editor of the Hindu Intelligencer. Many writers came to him to learn the art of writing in correct English. At this time, recognizing Kedaranatha Datta's natural ability, he assisted Kasiprasada by judging manuscripts submitted to the newspaper. Sri Kedaranatha Datta studied Kasiprasada's books and also frequented the public library. He attended Calcutta's Hindu Charitable Institution High School and became an expert English reader, speaker, and writer. He became ill from the salty water of Calcutta. He returned to Ulagrama and was treated by a Muslim soothsayer, Tantric, who predicted that the village of Biranagara would soon become pestilence-ridden and deserted. The Muslim also predicted Kedaranatha Datta would become recognized as a great devotee of Lord Krishna. At the age of 18 years, 1856, Kedaranatha Datta entered college in Calcutta. He started writing extensively in both English and Bengali. These essays were published in local journals. He also lectured in both languages. He further studied English literature at this time extensively, and taught speechmaking to a person who later became a well-known orator in the British Parliament. Between the years 1857 to 1858 he composed a two-part English epic entitled, The Purayad, which he planned to complete in 12 books. These two books described the life of Porus, who met Alexander the Great. Shriman Devendranatha Thakur, the eldest son of Maharshi Devendranatha Thakur, was Sri Kedaranatha Datta's best friend during these scholastic years. He assisted Kedaranatha Datta in his studies of Western religious literatures. Affectionately, Kedaranatha Datta used to call Devendranatha Thakura, Baro Dada, or Big Brother. He was very taken by Christian theology, and regarding it more interesting, and less offensive than Hindu monism, Advaita Vedanta of Sankaracharya. He would spend many hours comparing the writings of Channing, Theodore Parker, Emerson and Newman. At the British Indian Society he gave a lecture on the evolution of matter through the material mode of goodness. At the end of 1858 Kedaranatha Datta returned to Biranagara and found the Muzzi's prediction about that place to have come true. The place was ruined and deserted. Sri Kedaranatha Datta brought his mother and paternal grandmother with him from there to Calcutta. Soon after he went to Orissa to visit his paternal grandfather, Rajavallabha Datta, who used to be a big man in Calcutta, who was now living as an ascetic in the Orissaan countryside. His days were coming to a close. He could predict the future, so he knew it himself very well. He wanted Kedaranatha Datta to be with him when he departed this world, which he did in 1859, when Kedaranatha Datta was 21 years of age. After receiving his grandfather's last instructions, he traveled to all the monasteries and temples in the state of Orissa. As a young householder, Srila Bhaktivinoda began to consider the question of the means of his livelihood. He was not interested in business, as he'd seen how the apparent, necessary dishonesty of the trade world due to competition for sales had morally weakened the merchant class. Their work ethics becoming removed from the principle of mutually helping others, by which they would automatically be protected from failure to succeed, as well as being cooperatively assisted by the natural laws of compensation, karma. He decided instead to become a school teacher. He established a school for English education in the village of Kendrapara near Chudagrama, in Orissa, thus becoming a pioneer in English teaching in that state. He also could see the oppressive power wielded by the landowners of Chudagrama. After some time he went to Puri and passed a teacher's examination. He got a teacher's post in a Cuttack school and later became headmaster of a school in Bhadraka and then in Madanapura. His dedicated work was noted by the school board authorities. In Bhadraka, his first son Ananda Prasada, A. Sayutananda, was born, in 1860. He published a book that year in English that described all the ashramas and temples in the state. This book received favorable mention in the work called Orissa by British historian Sir William Hunter. Hunter praised Kedaranatha Datta's moral and religious character, as everyone did. As the headmaster of the Medanapura High School, Kedaranatha Datta looked into the various religious sects, their philosophies and practices. He could see that many of them were taking it all very cheaply. He came to understand that the only real religion that had ever been established in Bengal was that of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Unfortunately, at present, his movement was not well represented. Due to the misrepresentation, and corruptions and influence of the Appa Sampradayas, this sincere soul Sri Kedaranatha Datta could not even get a copy of the Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, despite all his efforts. The Thakura made an onslaught against those who belonged to the Apasampradayas who were polluting Gaudiya Vaishnavism by basically 13 deviant philosophies, Aula, Baula, 2 types. Kartabhaja, Netta, Daravesa, Sani, Sahajiya, Sakibeki, Smarta, Jatagasani, Ativadi, Kutadhari and Gauranga Nagari. These deviant groups, mostly because of their boldness, had been seen by the public as the Gaudiya Sampradaya, though actually none were following the pure Vaishnava regulative principles strictly, as laid down by the followers of Sri Krishna Chaitanya, namely the Goswamis. Being a follower of the Goswamis are not as interdependent on qualifying one to be a Gaudiya Vaishnava. For more details on Appa Sampradayas, one should read the very nice articles, running as a sequel in the Back to Godhead magazine 1991 editions on the same, by His Holiness Suhotra Swami, ISKCON. Sri Kedaranatha Datta's first wife died, so in the town of Jakapura he married Bhagavati Da. In the year 1861 Sri Kedarantha Datta accepted the post of deputy magistrate in the government of Bengal. Then he became collectorate officer after seeing the corruption of the government workers. He established an organization called the Bratur Samaja. He wrote an English book in 1863 called Our Wants. At this time he also constructed a home in Ranagata. Later in 1863 he stayed at Burdwan, where he composed 2 novel poems in Bengali, Vijayanagrama, Deserted Village, and Sannyasi. Volume 39 of the 1863 Calcutta Review praised these poems, saying, "We hope the author will continue to give his countrymen the benefit of his elegant and unassuming pen, which is quite free from those objectionable licenses of thought and expression, which abound in many dramas recently published. The want of the day is the creation of a literature for Hindu ladies, and we trust that many more educated natives will have the good sense to devote their time and abilities to the attainment of this most desirable aim." The rhyme and style of these 2 poems were original. They gave birth to a new way of writing poetry in the Bengali language. Sri Kedaranatha Datta, in the post of deputy magistrate. In the year 1866, Kedaranatha Datta took the position of deputy register with the power of a deputy collector and deputy magistrate in the district of Chapara. He also was known to have become quite fluent in Persian and Urdu. In a place called Saran in Chapara, a clique of tea planters made unjust demands of him. He successfully opposed them. And while at Saran he visited the Gaudamashrama at Godana. Desiring to establish a school for teaching Nyaya Shastra, he delivered a speech there, in 1866, which was well received. The school was in fact established, the foundation stone being laid in 1883 by Sir Rivers Thompson, after whom the school was named. Though Sri Kedaranatha Datta had no further part in the project after his speech, the talk he gave was instrumental in securing public aid for the school. Also in 1866 Kedaranatha Datta translated the Balid Registry Manual into Urdu, which was circulated by the government throughout the United Provinces of Agra and Oudh. This manual was used by the registration departments of those areas. Sri Kedaranatha Datta was transferred to Purnia from Chapara, where he took charge of the government and judicial departments. He was then transferred to Dinajapur, West Bengal, in 1868, becoming the deputy magistrate. At this time he received copies of the Srimad Bhagavatam and Chaitanya Charitamrita from Calcutta. He read Chaitanya Charitamrita repeatedly. His faith in Krishna consciousness developed until he was absorbed in the pure Bhakti Shastras day and night. He was incessantly submitting heartfelt prayers for the Lord's mercy. He came to understand the supreme majesty and power of the one and only absolute personality of Godhead Sri Krishna. He published a song about Lord Chaitanya entitled Saksidananda Premalankara in 1869, while serving as deputy magistrate under the government of Bengal in Dinajapur. He delivered a speech in the form of a treatise he had written on the Srimad Bhagavatam to a big congregation of many prominent men of letters from many parts of India and England. He was transferred to Kamparana, during which time his second son, Radhika Prasada, was born. In Kamparana, people used to worship a ghost in a banyan tree which had the power to influence the mind of the local judge to decide in the favor of the worshipper. Sri Kedaranatha Datta engaged the father of Pandita Ramabai, a famous girl scholar, to read Srimad Bhagavatam under the tree continuously, by day and night. After 1 month, the tree crashed to the ground, and naturally many people found faith in the Srimad Bhagavatam. From Kamparana he went to Puri, which gladdened his heart no end. Near the capital of Orissa, in the town of Kamanala, there lived a yogi named Basakasana, who would lean into a fire while sitting close by, then return to an erect sitting posture. In this way he'd rock back and forth over the flames. He could also produce fire from his head. He had 2 companions going by the names Brahma and Shiva. He claimed to be Mahavishnu. The small kings of Orissa came under his sway and were providing funds for the construction of a temple for the Triguna avatarases. They also sent him women with whom he engaged in Rasa Lila enjoyments. Basakasana declared he'd drive off the British from ruling Orissa and himself would become king. He published such statements, which were circulated all around Orissa. The British thought him a revolutionary for speaking out against the British Raj, so the district governor of the national government of Bengal drew up arrest orders. But nobody in Orissa dared to act upon these orders, as they all feared Basakasana. Mr. Ravenshaw, district commissioner for Orissa, requested Sri Kedaranatha Datta to bring Basakasana to justice. Sri Kedaranatha Datta went personally to Basakasana. Basakasana showed some powers that would normally scare off an ordinary man, and informed Kedaranatha Datta that he knew well who he was and his mission, but that since he, Basakasana, was the Lord, he'd better not interfere with him. That was enough for Sri Kedaranatha Datta, who replied by acknowledging Basakasana's accomplishments in yoga and tantra, and requested him to come to Puri where he could have the darshan of Jagannatha. Basakasana haughtily said, "Why should I come to see Jagannatha? He's only a hunk of wood. I am the supreme in person." Sri Kedaranatha Datta became instantly furious and arrested the rogue, brought him to Puri and threw him in jail, where he was guarded by 36 Muslim constables and 72 policemen from Cuttack day and night. The accomplices to the divine trilogy, Brahma and Shiva, avoided arrest by claiming they'd been forced by Basakasana to do as they'd done. But Mr. Taylor, subdivision officer at Kodar, later prosecuted them. The fearless Kedaranatha Datta tried Basakasana in Puri. The trial lasted 18 days, during which time thousands of people whom he had control over gathered outside the courtroom demanding Basakasina's release. On day 6 of the trial, Kedaranatha Datta's second daughter Kadambini, aged 7 years, became seriously ill and nearly died, but within a day she had recovered. Sri Kedaranatha Datta knew it was the power of the tantric yogi at work. He remarked, "Yes, let us all die, but this rascal must be punished." The very next day in court, the yogi announced he'd shown his power and would show much more. He suggested that Kedaranatha Datta should release him at once or face worse miseries. On the last day of the trial, Kedaranatha Datta himself became ill from high fever and suffered exactly as his daughter had done for one whole day. But the determined Kedaranatha Datta pronounced the man guilty and sentenced him to 18 months for political conspiracy. When Basakasina was being readied for jailing, one drive, Walter, the district medical officer, cut off all the yogi's hair. The yogi drew power from his long hair. He hadn't eaten or drunk during the whole trial, so he fell to the floor like a dead man and had to be taken by stretcher to jail. After 3 months he was moved to the central jail at Midnapura, where he took poison and died there in the year 1873. In Puri, Sri Kedaranatha Datta studied Srimad Bhagavatam with the commentary of Sridhara Swami. He also copied out in longhand the Sat Sandarbhas of Jiva Goswami and made a special study of Rupa Goswami's Bhakti Rasamrta Sindhu. Between the years 1874 and 1893, Vinod Thakur spent much time in seclusion chanting the holy name. Though he still executed his worldly duties perseveringly, he wrote several books in Sanskrit such as Sri Krishna Samhita, Tattva Sutram and Tattva Viveka, which we have cited in the early sections of this book. He wrote many books in Bengali such as the Kalyana Kalpataru. In 1874 he composted Datta Kaushubha, in Sanskrit. While in Puri he established a Vaishnava discussion society known as the Bhagavat Samsat in the Jagannatha Vallabha Gardens, where Sri Ramananda Raya did bhajana. All the prominent Vaishnavas joined this group, except for Raghunatha Dasa Babaji, known as Siddha Purusha. He thought that Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakura was unauthorized, as he did not wear kanthimala or tilaka. Moreover, he advised other Vaishnavas to avoid Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakura's association. But soon thereafter Raghunatha Dasa Babaji contracted a deathly illness for his offence. In a dream, Lord Jagannatha appeared to him and told him to pray for the mercy of Bhaktivinoda Thakura if he at all wanted release from the illness and death. He did so. Bhaktivinoda Thakura gave him special medicines and cured him, and also blessed Raghunatha Dasa Babaji with a true awareness of Bhaktivinoda Thakura's position. Others had a natural affection like Sri Swarupa Dasa Babaji, who did bhajana at Satasana near the ocean in Puri. He showed much affection for Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakura and gave him many profound instructions and insights from his own realizations on the bhajana of the holy name. Another Sharan Dasa Babaji preached and printed books advising that one should chant the Hare Krishna Mahamantra in japa and Nitai Gora Radhe Syama Hare Krishna Hare Rama in kirtana. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakura preached long and hard to him. After a long time Sharan Dasa Babaji came to his senses and begged forgiveness from Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakura, admitting his fault in spreading this nonsense mantra all over Bengal. 6 months later Sharan Dasa Babaji went mad and died in great distress. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakura was one of this age's foremost devotional scholars, yet humbly presents himself as the insignificant messenger of the Lord, as we can note from this following message of his. The way how I got the inspiration to compile this book, Srimad Bhagavata Arka Marichamala, is a divine mystery which I felt not proper from my part to disclose, as it might be bridging spiritual conceit, but subsequently I realized that it would be an undoing to my spiritual master, which might stand as an obstacle on the path of my spiritual progress. Therefore, without any shame, I record the fact that while under the benediction of my guru Sri Bapin Bihari Goswami, who belonged to the great heritage of Thakur Vamshibadananda, a faithful follower of my Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, I was deeply penetrating upon Srimad Bhagavatam. One day in a vision, Sri Svarup Damodara, the right-hand personal adherent of Lord Sri Chaitanya, instructed me to compile the slokas of Srimad Bhagavatam in accordance with the principles of Sambandha, Abhidhaya, and Prayohana, as laid down by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, so that the book will read with an easy understanding with great interest and delight by the loving devotees of the Lord. Sri Svarupa Damodar Prabhu further guided me by giving a wonderful explanation of the first sloka of Srimad Bhagavatam, and also showed me how I have to explain the slokas under the light of Gaudiya Vaishnava philosophy. B. P. Yati, 1978. Bhaktivinoda Thakur as Srimad Bhagavata Arka Marichamala. Chapter 20. Supplication 3. Inclusion. Page 479. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakura became manager of Jagannatha Puri temple. He used his government powers to establish regularity in the worship of the deity. In the Jagannatha Puri temple courtyard he established a Bhakti Mandapa, where daily discourses of Srimad Bhagavatam were held. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakura would spend long hours discussing Krishna and chanting the holy name, especially at Tota Gopinatha Mandir, the tomb of Haridasa Thakur, the Siddhabacula and the Gambhira. He made notes on the Vedanta Sutra which were used by Sri Syamalala Goswami in the edition of the Govinda Bhasya by Baladeva Vidyabhushana that he published near the Jagannatha Vallabha Gardens, in a large house adjacent the Narayana Chatta Matha, on the 5th day of the dark fortnight of Magha in the year 1874. The fourth son of Bhaktivinoda Thakura took birth. He was named Bimala Prasada, later known as Om Visnupada Paramahamsa Sri Srimad Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Prabhupada. As a householder, Bhaktivinoda, Kedarnatha Datta, had 2 wives and no less than 10 children, of which the great Vaisnava scholar Sri Srimad Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, Siddhanta Saraswati Thakura, was one. Bimala Prasad, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, was born in Sri Purushottama Kshetra, Jagannatha Puri, on the 6th of February 1874 AD, answering the prayer of Bhaktivinoda for the Lord to send a ray of Vishnu to preach the message of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu all over the world. He was given the name Bimal Prasad. When the child was 6 months old, Lord Jagannatha's cart stopped in front of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakura's house in Puri for 3 days during the procession. Bhaktivinoda told his wife, Bhagavati Devi, to bring out the child for darsan of Lord Jagannatha. As she placed the child before the Lord, a garland from the Lord encircled the baby boy, and the first grain ceremony, Annaprasna, was performed at that time with Jagannatha Prasad. Bimala Prasada stayed in Puri for 10 months after his birth and then went to Bengal by palanquin on his mother's lap. His infancy was spent at Nadia district's Ranagat hearing topics of Sri Hari. From his mother, Srila Bhaktivinoda and his wife were orthodox and virtuous. They never allowed their children to eat anything other than prasada, nor to associate with bad company. One day, when Bimala Prasada was still a small child of no more than 4 years, his father mildly rebuked him for eating a mango not yet duly offered to Lord Krishna. Bimala Prasada, although only a child, considered himself an offender to the Lord and vowed never to eat mangoes again. This was a vow that he would follow throughout this life. By the time Bimala Prasada was 7 years old, he had memorized the entire Bhagavad Gita and could even explain its verses, giving wonderful purports. His father then began training him in proofreading and printing, in conjunction with the publishing of the Vaisnava magazine Sajjana Tosani. 2 years earlier, Kamala Prasada, the third son of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakura, had taken birth. In 1874, Bhaktivinoda Thakura discovered the Raja of Puri had misappropriated 80,000 rupees for sense gratification. This money belonged to the temple, so Bhaktivinoda Thakura forced the Raja to give Lord Jagannatha bhoga 52 times daily. This diminished the money quickly. The Raja was angry at Bhaktivinoda Thakura and began, with the help of 50 feet pandits, a Maran Karmani Tantric Yajna, meant for killing Bhaktivinoda Thakura, which went on for 30 days. When the last oblations were poured, it was the king's son and not the pure-hearted Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakura who died. He left Puri on special business, returned to Bengal and saw Navadvip, Santipura and Kalana. He was put in charge of the subdivision Mahisareka in Haora. After that he was transferred to Bhadraka. In August 1878 he was made head of the subdivision Narayala in the Yashohan district. While in Narayala, his two famous books Sri Krishna Samhita and Krishna Kalpataru were published. In a letter dated April 16, 1880, Dr. Reinhold Rost wrote to Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakura, by representing Krishna's character and his worship in a more sublime and transcendental light than has hitherto been the custom to regard him, you have rendered an essential service to your co-religionists, and no one would have taken more delight in your work than my departed friend Goldstucker, the sincerest and most zealous advocate the Hindus ever had in Europe. These two works brought the devotional attention of many of India's pandits and educated men. In 1877 Virata Prasada was born, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakura's fifth son. In 1878, Viraja Prasada was born, the sixth son. Both appeared at Ranagata. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakura took Pankaratrika Diksha, initiation from Bipin Bihari Goswami, descended from the Janava family of Bhagnapara. At the same time, his seventh son, Lalita Prasada, appeared at Ranagata. Many people had adopted Vaishnavism at Harila, but they could not tell who was a Vaishnava and who not. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakura gave them shelter and instructed them on this matter most exactingly. Once Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakura and his son cum assistant went to see Bhaktivinoda's guru, Vipin Bihari Goswami. Vipin Bihari Goswami was coming in the disciplic succession from Sri Gadadhar Pandit, the plenary portion of Srimati Radharani. The followers of this line are generally Raganuga Bhaktas. Worshipping Sri Gaura Gadadhara in a loving spontaneous mood of bhava. This mode of worship is not for those who are materially confined by the dictates of the body and senses, but for those who are already experiencing their eternal loving relationship with the divine couple Sri Radha Krishna. There is an interesting little story which captures the mood of Bhaktivinoda and that of his son, then named Siddhanta Saraswati. In their Siddha Deha, as pure, Nitya Siddha, eternal associates of Lord Krishna, Bhaktivinoda Thakura as Kamala Manjari, one of the maid servants of the Gopis, and Siddhanta Saraswati as her assistant Nayana Manjari. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakura's dealings with his Diksha Guru were always exemplary, even though Vipin Bihari Goswami was not very advanced, being a Kanistha Adhikari Guru, whereas the Thakura was an Uttama Adhikari, Paramahamsa, of the highest order. Still Bhaktivinoda always played the humble disciple. On one such occasion in the presence of young Siddhanta Saraswati, Bhaktivinoda Thakura paid his respectful obeisances to his Guru. Vipin Bihari Goswami replied by placing his feet on the Thakura's head. For the young fiery Siddhanta Saraswati this was too much. It was one thing that his father had accepted him as his formal initiating spiritual master, but this was going too far. Srila Siddhanta Saraswati was only 7 years old at the time, but when Bhaktivinoda Thakura left the room leaving the two of them alone, Siddhanta Saraswati decided to set things straight. You were acting like a big guru. And you place your feet on the heads of those who you don't know. If you knew who the Thakura is, you would not do it. But you do not know. My father is a great exalted, Nitya Siddha, eternal associate of Sri Radha and Krishna who has come here to fulfill their mission. Do you think that you are so advanced that you can place your feet on the head of such a person? I think not. You have proven yourself to be a Kanistha Adhikari, neophyte, by not being able to distinguish between those who are advanced and those who are less advanced. Therefore I suggest that you desist from this practice any further. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakura then re-entered the room and the conversation changed. Later that day Vipin Bihari Goswami mentioned to Bhaktivinoda, your son is bold to the point of being rude. Later Thakura Bhaktivinoda found out about the conversation and used to jokingly glorify his exalted son to his friends, saying how he is fearless, that he even chastised my guru, Vipin Bihari Goswami. Reflecting on this incident we can see that even if one's spiritual master is not an Uttama Adhikari, Mahabhagavat, devotee of the Lord, still one should be satisfied, and serve him anyway. Bhaktivinoda Thakura, who himself was certainly a Mahabhagavat, set the example how to serve and show respects. On the other side of the transcendental coin, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati showed a nice lesson to us. We should not show ourselves to be more advanced than we really are, lest we commit offenses against those who are actually advanced. In 1881 Bhaktivinoda Thakura began publishing Sajanatasani, his Vaisnava journal. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakura had previously pilgrimaged to Kasi, Prayaga, Mathura and Vrindavana, Vraja Mandal, in 1866. At the close of his stay in Narayala he desired to again see the land of Vraja. He took 3 months for this purpose. At this time he met Srila Jagannatha Dasa Babaji there, who had a program by which he moved every 6 months between Navadvipa and Vrindavana. Meeting him, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakura accepted him as his eternally worshipable, Siksa, instructing, Guru. During his pilgrimage at this time he dealt with a gang of dacoits, known as the Kanjaras, who robbed and killed pilgrims. He gave evidence to the government and a commission was formed to wipe out this scourge. From Vrindavana he came to Calcutta and bought a house at 181, Manaktala Street, now called Ramasha Datta Street, near Bidana Park. He started daily worship of Sri Giridhari, the transcendental form of Krishna who appeared in the form of Govardhan Hill, and called the house Bhakti Bhavan. He was appointed head of the subdivision of Barasa. In 1881, in the course of excavating for the construction of the Bhakti Bhavana, at Rambagan in Calcutta, a deity of Kurmadeva was unearthed. After initiating his 7-year-old son, Bhaktivinoda entrusted Bimala with the service of the deity of Kurmadeva. The well-known novelist Bankim Chandra met Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakura at Barasa. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakura had written a book about Krishna and showed it to Bhaktivinoda Thakura, who preached to Bankim Chandra for 4 days, taking little food and hardly any sleep. The result was Bankim Chandra changed his ideas, which were mundane speculations about Krishna, and his book to conform with the teachings of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakura used to say, "Knowledge is power." On April 1, 1884, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakura was appointed the senior deputy magistrate of Srirampur, where he admitted Bimala in the Srirampur High School. When Bimala was a mere student in class 5, he invented a new method of writing named Bakanto. During this period, he took lessons in mathematics and astrology from Pandita Mahesakandra Kudamoni. However, he preferred to read devotional books rather than the school texts. During the last year of his stay at Barasat, 1886, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakura published an edition of the Bhagavad Gita with the Sanskrit commentary of Srila Vishwanatha Chakravarti Thakur, which he translated into Bengali, the Rasika Ranjana translation. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakura had undertaken this task at the request of Babu Sarada Karana Mitra, ex-judge of the Calcutta High Commission. Shriman Bankima Chandra wrote the preface. Acknowledging his own indebtedness to Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakura, he noted that all Bengali readers would be indebted to Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakura for his saintly work. From Barasat, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakura was transferred to Sriramapur. He visited the residence of Udarana Datta Thakur, a great associate of Lord Nityananda, at Saptagram. At Kanakula he visited the place of Abhirama Thakur, and saw the place of another great devotee of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Vasu Ramananda, at Kulinagrama. At Sriramapura he composed and published his masterly writing, Sri Chaitanya Siksamrta, and also the Vaisnava Siddhanta Mala, Prema Pradipa, and Mana Siksa. He was also publishing Sajanatasani on a regular basis. In Calcutta he set up the Sri Chaitanya Yantra, a printing press at the Bhakti Bhavana, upon which he printed Maladhara's Sri Krishna Vijaya and his own Amnaya Sutra and the Caitanyopanishad of the Atharva Veda. Finding the Caitanyopanishad was a difficult task. Hardly anyone in Bengal had heard of it. Consequently, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakura had to travel to many places in Bengal looking for it. Finally, one devoted Vaisnava Pandita named Madhusudana Dasa, sometimes found listed in the Guru Parampara listings, sent an old copy he'd been keeping with him at Sambalapura for Bhaktivinoda Thakura. Bhaktivinoda Thakura wrote a Sanskrit commentary on the book and called it Sri Chaitanya Karanamrta. Madhusudana Dasa Mahasaya translated the verses into Bengali. This translation was called Amrita Bindu. It was a sellout when published. In Calcutta, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakura started the Sri Visva Vaisnava Sabha, dedicated to the preaching of pure Bhakti as taught by Lord Chaitanya. To publicize the work of the society, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakura published a small booklet entitled Visva Vaisnava Kalpavi. Also he published his own edition of the Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, with his Amrita Prabhava Bhasya commentary. And he introduced the Chaitanyabda or Chaitanya era calendar, and gave assistance to the propagation of the Chaitanya Panjika, which established the feast day of Gora Purnima. He lectured and gave Readings on books like the Bhakti Rasamrta Sindhu of Srila Rupa Goswami, in various Vaishnava societies. He published in the Hindu Herald, an English periodical, a detailed account of Sri Chaitanya's life. It was at this time that the learned Vaisnavas recognized Kedaranatha Datta and given the honorary title as Bhakti Vinoda Thakura. In the year 1887, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakura resolved to quit government service and go to Vrindavana with Bhaktibhringa Mahasaya for the rest of his life. One night in Tarakaswara, while on government service, he had a dream in which Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu appeared to him and spoke, "You will certainly go to Vrindavana, but first there is some service you must perform in Navadvipa, so what will you do about that?" When the Lord disappeared, Bhaktivinoda Thakura awoke. Srila Bhakti Brinha Mahasaya, hearing of this dream, told Bhaktivinoda Thakura to apply for a transfer to Krishnanagara. He did, even turning down offers of personal assistantship to the Chief Commissioner of Assam and the seat of the Minister of Tripura State. He even tried to retire at this time, but his application was not accepted. Finally, in December of 1887 he arranged for a mutual exchange of personnel, himself for Babu Radha Madhava Vasu, Deputy Magistrate of Krishnanagara. During his stay at Krishnanagara, Bhaktivinoda Thakura used to go to Navadvipa and search for the birth site of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. One night he was sitting on the roof of the Rani Dharmasala in Navadvipa chanting on his japa beads, when he spotted a very tall tala tree with some very strange substance attached to it. Near the tree was a small building that gave off a remarkable effulgence. Soon afterwards, he went to the Krishnanagara collectory where he began to study some very old manuscripts of Chaitanya Bhagavat and Navadvipa Dhamma Parikrama by Narahari Sarkar, and some old maps of Nadia. He went to the village of Balaladibi and spoke with many elderly people there, and uncovered facts about the modern-day Navadvipa. In the year 1887 he discovered that the place he'd seen from the Dharmasala rooftop was in fact the birthplace of Mahaprabhu. This was confirmed by Srila Jagannatha Dasa Babaji, the head of the Gaudiya Vaisnava community in Nadia. A great festival was held there. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakura published the Navadvipa Dhamma Mahatmya. Also in 1887, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakura renovated the house of Srila Jagannatha Dasa Babaji at Ravishgada. He took leave from office for 2 years and acquired a plot of land at Sri Gadadramadvipa, or Svarupaganga. He built a retirement house there for his bhajana, and called it Sarabi Kunja. In 1890 he established the Namahata there. Sometimes Jagannatha Dasa Babaji would come there and have kirtana. Lord Nityananda had established his Namahata at the same place. Bhaktivinoda Thakura considered himself the street sweeper of the Nama Hata of Nitai. Once whilst stationed in Krishnaga, every second spare was spent in Mayapur. As mentioned in the story of Jagannatha Dasa Babaji, Thakura Bhaktivinoda, along with Babaji Maharaja, found Lord Chaitanya's birthplace in the year 1887. When the birthplace was uncovered, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakura and Srila Jagannatha Dasa Babaji would worship Lord Chaitanya there. This episode was told in regard to Srila Jagannatha Dasa Babaji's life. Once one of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakura's sons contracted a skin disease. Jagannatha Dasa Babaji told the boy to lie down at the birth site of Lord Chaitanya for the night. He did so, and the next morning he was cured. In 1888 he took charge of the village of Netrakona in the district of Mayamanasimha. Because he could not keep good health in Krishnanagara and had requested transfer to a more healthful region. From Netrakona he came to Tangaila, and from there he was transferred to the district of Vardhamana. There he would have kirtana with the devotees from a place called Imalahora, headed by Kshetra Babu and Vipina Babu. They would sing poems like Soka Satana written by him. He was put in charge of the Kalara subdivision in 1890, and from there would often visit such holy places as Gadadramadwipa, Navadwipa, Kapahati, Samudragana, Chupi, Kasthasali, Idrakapura, Bhaganapara, Piariganga, the place of Nakula Brahmachari, and the place of Vrindavana Dasa Thakur at Denyora. Soon Bhaktivinoda Thakura was transferred for a few days to Ranayata, from where he came to Dinajapura again. Salaja Prasada was born there, his youngest son. In Dinajapura Srila, Bhaktivinoda Thakura wrote his Vidva Ranjana commentary and translation of the Bhagavad Gita. It was published in 1891 with the commentary of Baladeva. 1891 was the year Bhaktivinoda Thakura took leave from the government service for 2 years. He desired to preach Sri Hari Nama. His base was at Gadadramadwipa. From there he used to visit such places as Gatala and Ramajavana to lecture in clubs, societies and organizations. This he'd also often do in Krishnanagara. He traveled and preached in March of 1892 in the Basirahata district together with some other Vaishnavas. All the while he was writing also. He opened many branches of Namahata in different districts of Bengal. The Namahata became a self-sustaining success which continued to spread even after his return to government service. Also from Basirahata he set out on his third trip to Vrindavana. He stopped off at Imalahora to celebrate the Ekadasa day with Srila Jagannatha Dasa Babaji. In Vraja, he visited all the forests and places of pastimes. He continued to give lectures and readings on Harinama in various places in Bengal when he returned to Calcutta. In February 1891 he gave a lecture on his investigation into the whereabouts of the actual birthsite of Sri Chaitanya. His audience included highly learned men from all over Bengal, who became very enthusiastic at the news. Out of this gathering the Sri Navadvipa Dhamma Prakarini Sabha was formed for spreading the glories of Navadvipa Mayapura. All the learned pandits, having deliberated fully on Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakura's evidence, agreed that the Yogapitha was the true birthsite of Mahaprabhu. That year, on Gora Purnima, a big festival was held that witnessed the installation of Gora Vishnupriya deities at the Yogapitha. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakura, personally, in a spirit of pure humility, went door to door collecting to raise funds to build a temple on the very site. In the Amrita Bazar Patrika, December 1894, an article appeared. Babu Kedarnatha Datta, the distinguished magistrate who has just retired from service, is one of the most active members. Indeed, Babu Kedarnatha Datta has been deputed by his committee to raise subscriptions in Calcutta and elsewhere and is determined to go from house to house if necessary, and beg a rupee from each Hindu gentleman for noble purpose. If Babu Kedarnatha Datta sticks to his resolution of going around with bag in hand, we hope that no Hindu gentleman whose house may be honored by the presence of such a devout bhakta as Babu Kedarnatha, will send him away without contributing his mite, however humble it may be, to the Gora Vishnupriya Temple Fund. His venture was highly successful and the temple was built. In October 1894, at age 56, he retired from his post as deputy magistrate, though this move was opposed by his family and the government authorities. He stayed at Sarabi Kunja and preached, as well as revised his old writings. Sometimes he went to Calcutta. There he begged door to door for building the Yogapitha temple. In July 1896, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakura went to Tripura at the request of the king, who was a Vaishnava. He stayed in the capital for 4 days and preached the glories of Sri Hari Nama. His lecture on the first day amazed all the local panditas. On the next 2 days the local royal family and general public thrilled to his talks on the pastimes of Mahaprabhu. His mercy far outreaches the geographical boundaries of India or even Asia, taking Krishna consciousness to the west. Back in Godruma, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakura sent out a small booklet, written in Sanskrit, to Sri Gauranga Lila Smarana Mangala Stotram, with a commentary by Srila Siddhikantha Vakaspati of Nadia. The intro, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, his life and precepts, was in English, which we have included in this book in the section on Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. This book found its way into the Library of the Royal Asiatic Society in London, the Library of McGill University in Canada, the year is 1896, and other respectable institutions. It was reviewed in the Journal of the Royal Asiatic Society by Mr. F. W. Fraser, an erudite European scholar. In the rainy season of 1896, requested by the Maharaja of Tripura, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakura went to Darjeeling and Karsiam. In 1897 he went to many villages such as Medinapura and Sari to preach. Sri Sasira Kunara Gosa was the founder of the Amrita Bazar Patrika and the author of the Sri Imaya Nimai Karita. He had great respect for Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakura. He also took up the preaching of the holy name throughout Calcutta and in many villages in Bengal. He published the Sri Visnu Priya O Ananda Bazar Patrika, under the editorship of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakura. In one of his letters to Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakura he wrote, I have not seen the 6 Goswamis of Vrindavana, but I consider you to be the 7th Goswami. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakura's son Bimala Prasad, latter Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, had been residing at Puri as a Nisthika Brahmachari celibate student, and was engaged in bhajan at the Gandharvika Giridhari Matha, one of 7 Mathas, near the Samadhi tomb of Haridasa Thakur on the seashore. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakura, desiring to help his son, had the monastery cleaned and repaired when he came to Puri himself at the beginning of the 20th century. After the young Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati left Puri for Sri Navadvipa Mayapur, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakura constructed his own place of bhajana on the beach, calling it Bhakti Kuti. One Sri Krishnadasa Babaji, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakura's devoted assistant and disciple, joined him there at this time, and he became very dear to Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakura and was his constant attendant up to the end of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakura's life. He began solitary bhajan worship and devotional meditation. At this time, he had many visitors at this place, and some of them simply wanted to disturb him, whereas others were sincere and benefited greatly from his spiritual inspiration. In 1908, 3 months before he took sannyasa, a son of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakura who was working in the Writers' Building in Calcutta, came home to inform Bhaktivinoda Thakura that Sir William Duke, Chief Secretary to the government, was in Calcutta. Formerly Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakura had served under him as a magistrate. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakura made an appointment to meet him the next day at the Writers' Building. Sir William Duke met with Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakura on the street outside the building and personally escorted him into his office. With folded hands, he asked forgiveness for having once planned to remove Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakura from office of district magistrate. This was because he thought that if such qualified Indians take up such posts, the British would not last much longer in India. In those days, while studying Bhaktivinoda Thakura's activities, then Kedarnatha Datta, he'd come to his house and would be fed puri, luchi, and sweets by the Thakura's wife. But now he was begging forgiveness. As he was getting on in life, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakura answered, "I consider you to be a good friend and a well-wisher all along." Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakura was pleased with him and gave him his blessings. Later Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakura admitted he was astonished that Sir William Duke wanted to harm him in some way. In the year 1908 Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakura took the external, visa, dress of a Babaji, at Satasana in Puri technically, which is called his accepting Paramahamsa Sannyasa. Among the Gaudiya Sampradaya, until 1910 he would move between Calcutta and Puri, and was still writing books, but during that year he shut himself up and entered Samadhi, claiming paralysis. It was on June 23, 1914, just before noon at Jagannatha Puri, that Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakura Prabhupada left his body, on the Gaudiya Panjika. This day was also the disappearance day of Sri Gadadhara Pandita. But from Orissa his bodily remains were taken back to his beloved Godruma, in the land of Nadia. Amidst Sankirtana, his remains were interred in Godruma after the next solstice. The summer solstice had just begun when Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakura Prabhupada had left his body. Remembering his divine character. In an obituary about Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakura, Sarada Karana Mitra, Calcutta High Court judge, wrote, "I knew Thakur Bhaktivinod intimately as a friend and a relation. Even under the pressure of official work as a magistrate in charge of a heavy subdivision, he could always find time for devotional contemplation and work. And whenever I met him, our talk would turn in a few moments to the subject of bhakti, and achintya bheda abheda, dvaitadvaita vada, etc., and the saintly work that lay before him. Service of God is the only thing he longed for, and service under the government, however honorable, was to him a clog." Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakura's daily schedule: 7:30 to 8 p.m., take rest. 10 p.m., rise, light oil lamp, write. 4 a.m., take rest. 4:30 rise, wash hands and face, chant Hare Krishna Mahamantra japa. 7 o'clock write letters. 7:30 read. 8:30 receive guests, or continue to read. 9:30 to 9:45 take rest. 9:45 morning bath, breakfast of half-quart milk, couple of chapatis, some fruits. 9:55 go to court in carriage. He would wear coat and pants to court, with double-sized tulasi neck beads, and Vaishnava tilaka. He was very strong in his decisions. He would decide immediately. He did not allow any humbug in his court. No upstart could stand before him. He would shave his head monthly. He never allowed harmonium in his Sankirtan, considering it a distraction from the sound of the Nama Prabhu. He never had any debts. 10 o'clock court began. 1 p.m., court finished. He'd come home and bathe and refresh. 2 p.m., return to office. 5 p.m., translate works from Sanskrit to Bengali. Then take evening bath and meal of rice, couple of chapatis. Half quart, 1 pint 20 ounces, or approximately half liter, of milk. He always consulted a pocket watch, and was always accountable, keeping time very punctually. He was always charitable to Brahmanas, and equally befriended other castes. He never showed pride, and his amiable disposition was a characteristic feature of his life. He never accepted gifts from anyone. He even declined all honors and titles offered by the government to him on the grounds that they might stand against his holy mission of life. He was very strict in moral principles, and avoided the luxurious life. He would not even chew betel. He disliked theaters because they were frequented by public women. He spoke Bengali, Sanskrit, English, Latin, Urdu, Persian and Oriya. He started writing books at age 12, and continued turning out a profuse number of volumes up until his departure from this world. As with all of the wonderful personalities we have touched on, there are so many things that can be said to glorify such incredible devotees, but just to keep this book in perspective, we are just trying to give a taste. For further details on Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakura, Rupa Vilasa Prabhu, a disciple of Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, has compiled a book on the life of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakura entitled, The Seventh Goswami.